What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. Welcome to Splash City. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So today, we're going to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers and their offseason plans. We're continuing our offseason breakdown series, taking a look at the Cavs and what their future is looking like, because this is, for a couple of years running now, has been one of the worst teams in the NBA, still in the middle of their rebuild, and they're hoping to, get back into the playoffs relatively soon here because they've been rebuilding for like 3-4 seasons. So Cleveland's gonna hopefully make some moves to try to get better this offseason, and we're going to talk about it. Reminder to everybody that these videos this week, this one and the past 5, have all been pre-recorded out of town still. This is the last one, though. After this, I'll be back. The next time you see me, I will be current. So hopefully everything goes smoothly and goes well, and all these videos are uploaded and available for you guys to see. So this is the last one, but I'm recording this one on June 12th, so about a week and a half before you see this one, this is recorded. So trying my best to make sure that all this information is still accurate, but as we know, things change quickly in the NBA. So if any of this is still, is not relevant to you or has changed since I've recorded this, that is why. Yeah, let's get on with the video. So Cleveland, like I said, is in the middle of their rebuild. They are still very much one of the worst teams in the NBA. They finished with a bottom 5 record for like 3-4 seasons in a row now, basically. So the Cavs are not very good, right? This is a team full of a lot of young guys. They've had all these lottery picks over the past couple of years. Their young core, is Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, Isaac Okoro are their draft picks from the past couple of seasons. You can maybe lump Jared Allen in there as well. Hopefully they extend him. We'll get to his free agency in a second. Dylan Windler is a recent draft pick. Larry Nance, even though he's a little bit older, is still a good player and a nice piece for them. Chetty Osman, also a couple of years older, but is still a nice player to have. So that's really what their young core is looking like, and they're going to be looking to add to that over this season and the next coming seasons, but with an eye towards getting into the playoffs sooner rather than later, because you don't really want to go more than like 3 seasons in a complete tank, and that's where the Cavs are right now. So they're going to be trying to at least be a little bit more competitive next season, at least I would hope. So here's the cap sheet for the Cavs. They are going to be right up against the salary cap like a lot of the other teams in the league. There's only a few teams out there with cap space. So they're going to have a little bit of money to play with, I think, but a lot of that is going to go to Jared Allen, assuming that they do extend him. So they probably won't have too much money to work with, barring a Kevin Love salary dump, which is pretty unlikely at this point. So let's go over these players. Most of their guys, honestly, are back. They don't have a ton of key free agents this offseason. Kevin Love and Taurean Prince, those two guys up there that are getting paid the most. I would not be surprised if either of them were moved this offseason. We know Kevin Love and his frustration with the team has sort of reached a boiling point this year, and that was kind of covered a lot in the middle of the season, where he was kind of, throwing the inbound pass, at his own teammates and like getting frustrated visibly on the bench and stuff like that. So Kevin Love is a guy who, he's a veteran. He's 32 years old. He's getting paid a lot of money to play in Cleveland, and it's pretty clear the direction the team has been going. And he's the one who signed that big deal, right? He got his money and he got what he was wanting. So, he can't be too mad about it, right? But I'm sure that he would like to play on a competitive basketball team. But at this point, I think a trade is pretty unlikely because he's just simply not worth, $30 million a season plus. He's just not worth that much. And so any team out there that's going to try to trade for him would most likely be a team that's wanting to take on a bad contract, which would also be a bad team, a team like the Thunder, with the cap space in order to take on Kevin Love. So I don't know if the Thunder would be willing to take on that salary and then maybe buy him out. Maybe they do something similar with Al Horford as well and get them both into free agency. I'm not sure. So maybe, the Cavs can work something out, either buy him out outright, kind of like how Cleveland did with Drummond last year, and then, Blake Griffin got his wish with the Pistons, and he was actually in a similar situation with those 2 years left on his deal, around $30 million per, and Blake Griffin did get his buyout. So Kevin Love is going to be in that same situation this coming season, and we'll see if they can work out a buyout with him. But hopefully for his sake and for the team's sake and everybody's sake, they can get him off the team next year, because he just clearly doesn't want to be there. They don't want him there, and it's best for both sides just to move on. So I wouldn't say that I would anticipate that he'll be on a different team next year, just because it's so hard to get that contract off the books, but I think that both sides are going to try as hard as they can to get Kevin Love to a different team. Taurean Prince also, that one's a little more tradable considering it's expiring for only $15 million. That could be a buyout guy as well. You know, he's only 27 years old, but I could definitely see, you know, them targeting a buyout with Taurean Prince because they don't really want that money on the books, and it doesn't really matter to them, and he's, you know, outside of the timeline, and he's not in the long-term plans of the team, and he might go and sign a, you know, a minimum deal or close to it with a different team. So Taurean Prince could be a guy that I could see getting bought out. Larry Nance, I think they'll hold on to him. He has some value on the market. There were some rumors around him at the trade deadline, but I think he's pretty good, and he's only 28. You know, maybe he doesn't fit the long-term plan with this team, but he's a nice guy to have around, I think. Similar with Cedi Osman. Both of those guys, I think, are on bargain deals, and contenders would like to pick them up. And so maybe if the Cavs are looking to get some extra draft capital or maybe a younger player, they could consider moving either of those guys. But I think for now, they're pretty safe bets to remain with Cleveland. Darius Garland, Isaac Okoro, Colin Sexton, that's the young core that I mentioned. You know, Garland and Okoro were under contract. Sexton does have that 1 year left on his rookie deal, so he's up for an extension this offseason. I would assume they'd work on that with him. Maybe it could be a max rookie extension. Is that crazy? This 2018 draft class is pretty freaking good, you guys. Like, there's a lot of good players in this class, and Sexton is one of them. So we'll see what kind of deal he ends up getting. Maybe it's the max, maybe it's close to it. I could see him, you know, getting a similar payday to what De'Aaron Fox got with the Kings, you know, last offseason. He is about on that level of player to me. Probably not quite as good as Fox, but I think the Cavs value him. So we'll see, you know, what the number is on a Sexton extension, but they should probably work something out there. Jarrett Allen entering restricted free agency. This is a big one. Obviously, he was brought in that big 4-team deal that brought James Harden to Brooklyn. The Cavs kind of swooped in there and snagged Jarrett Allen away from the Rockets because Houston didn't want him. So Cleveland gets Jarrett Allen here. He was really good for them this year. He's their center of the future. That's one of the big reasons they decided to buy out Andre Drummond and move on from him the way that they did. So Jarrett Allen's a guy who I'm assuming they're going to want to keep him around. He's really good, and his contract could, you know, be a nice payday for him as well. I don't think it'll approach, you know, max levels or anything like that, but, you know, 20 million annually, 20, 22, 23 million annually is about the range you're looking at for Jarrett Allen. I do think he's that good. So hopefully Cleveland's willing to go that high because I think he's a good fit on this team. I think he fits in nicely with that young core, and they traded for him for a reason. So I would assume they'll come to terms for an extension for Jarrett Allen. Matthew Dellavedova is a free agent. Who knows if they're going to bring him back or not. He's a veteran, you know, obviously been around the team for a long time. This is his second stint with Cleveland, and he's, you know, he's okay. He doesn't play a ton, but Dellavedova is a guy who, you know, you more have for the locker room presence than anything else, kind of a mentor for some of their younger guards. So if they felt like he did a good job at that last season, they'll probably want to take another chance on him. Damian Dotson is non-guaranteed next season. You know, doesn't really matter too much. He was kind of one of those, you know, wily guys that you bring in and see if he has anything left, just because he's one of those fringe NBA prospects. You know, a bad team can kind of take a chance on him. He's like fine, but I don't know if he's far from guaranteed for next year. Dean Wade is also non-guaranteed. He's also like okay. He's still only 24, so he still has a little bit of potential. You know, stretch big type of guy. So I could see them bringing back Dean Wade. He's under contract for a couple more seasons at that non-guaranteed number. Isaiah Hartenstein has a player option. I would assume he would pick that up, considering that I think his NBA career is nearing its end. He was brought in a trade, I believe, this season at the deadline. Part of that JaVale McGee swap is what it was. So that player option for Hartenstein, I think he would pick that up, or maybe they trade him or cut him or something like that, but I think he's going to want to take that money there for him. Jeremiah Martin, Lamar Stevens, Broderick Thomas, none of those guys really matter all that much. Those are, you know, two-way guys, all three of them. How do they have 3 two-way guys on their books? I don't know how they have 3 two-way guys, but apparently they do. So those 3, whatever. I think Lamar Stevens actually hit a game winner for them this year, if I'm remembering that correctly, but those guys don't really matter for anything. And then let's talk about their draft pick. They have the 5th best lottery odds, so it's about a 45% chance for them to jump into the top 4. You know, not necessarily jump into the top 4 because they're not jumping very far. Obviously, their default pick odds are at number 5, but it's actually not a very good chance that they get number 5. It's only 2% that they end up actually at number 5, even though they have the 5th best odds. That's just kind of the way that the lottery works. So, you know, it's about an 11% chance for each slot between 1 and 4. So 11.5 to get the first overall pick. Decent shot at Cade Cunningham. You know, if you land at number 2, Evan Mobley, even though his fit with Jared Allen might be questionable, I don't know if I would reach for Mobley there at number 2. But you have your shot at Kuminga, Jalen Green, Jalen Suggs, same guys I've mentioned over the past couple of days. You could potentially fall down to 7. It's a 25% chance to end up at 7, which is not ideal because then you miss out on all those guys most likely. 18% chance to go at number 6. So they're hoping to jump into the top 4, obviously, but 6 and 7 are both okay selections. They could potentially fall all the way down to 9, but it's only about a 0.5% chance that they fall to 9. So most likely somewhere between 1 and 7. Any of those picks up in the air for Cleveland, and so we'll see where they end up here. But in the draft, you should just be targeting best player available. I mean, you don't necessarily need a guard or a center, kind of, now that I think about it a little bit more, because you have Jared Allen, so I don't know if Mobley would be the best fit. And then you also have both Garland and Sexton locked into those guard spots, so another smaller guard would not necessarily be the best idea. So maybe not Jalen Suggs, even though he can play a little bit bigger, but he's not super tall. So, you know, your ideal target would be like maybe a forward like Kuminga or Jalen Green, or if you get first overall, obviously Cade Cunningham would slide in perfectly. So any of those guys I think would be good targets for Cleveland, but realistically, you're just looking for whoever you think is going to be the best future of your team, especially if you feel like, Mobley or one of the guards at the top of the draft has even more potential than the guys you already have on your roster. You can always trade somebody later. So not the end of the world for Cleveland. They're going to pick whoever they feel like is the best fit for their team. And then as far as needs in free agency, everything, I think you're okay at guard with Garland and Sexton, but you could use a backup. You could use a backup center, assuming you don't draft one, be behind Jared Allen, and just depth on the wings. But I mean, just taking more gambles on young talent, adding some veterans in there that you hope can contribute a little bit, and trying to trade Kevin Love as much as possible. I don't think you're going to be able to, just dump that contract, so it's not like you're going to open up a ton of salary cap space for that, but maybe whether that's buying him out or trading him or getting Kevin Love off the team, I think should be one of the biggest priorities for Cleveland this year. They just got to move on at this point. It's past time, and they're going to have to move on to getting some other pieces on this roster and not focusing on Kevin Love anymore. So I'm not sure that the Cavs are going to have the upside this season to potentially try to make the playoffs. I just don't see an avenue for them to add significant pieces unless they jump up and get the first overall pick, and Cade Cunningham's awesome right away. But other than him, I mean, there's really not a ton of avenues for them to add a ton of talent, just because they're limited on cap space and they don't have a ton of assets to trade unless they're going all in for a star. But even then, I don't know if that's like the best plan of action for them. That kind of jumpstarts their timeline a little bit. So it might be like one more season of a full rebuild before they can really go in, because the following offseason, not this year but next offseason, they will have some cap space to play with, assuming that the Sexton and Jared Allen extensions are not too huge. So you should have a little bit of cap space to maybe add some pieces this, in a couple of years, and we'll see how they go. But Cleveland is in this interesting spot where they've got some young talent, but they're not, they're just not quite ready yet to jump into the playoffs. So we'll see how good they end up being. But I would anticipate another season in the lottery for the Cavs with their eyes on maybe making a return to the playoffs in 2023. But yeah, that's all I have on the Cleveland Cavaliers and their ongoing rebuild. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to. Leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the Cavs and their offseason plans. Would love to hear your thoughts on this team down below. But yeah, with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.